Please take me to the hospital. We have to go now.
He glanced at the phone and muttered, "There's nothing I can do that the doctors can't. He can wait until morning." Then he rolled back over to sleep. His mother nodded from the doorway. "Call an Uber with money you don't have." So Nala went alone. None of them knew the brother they'd spent years calling a failure had one final secret that was about to change all of their lives. "He was always a burden," Mama Abina said, not even lowering her voice. "Let the poor man rest." Down the hall, Teshi laughed at something on her phone. "When you get back," Darius said into his pillow, "we'll talk about the child. My mother has ideas." Nala closed the door softly. She did not slam it. She did not cry. "Her name is Nala. The man in that bed was Darius, her husband of 6 years, a builder who had spent those years building everything except a home. The night her brother lay dying, Darius could not spare a car. His mother could not spare a kind word, and the woman he had started choosing over his own wife lay laughing in a guest room down the hall. He had no idea the brother he called a failure had quietly become the one thing his entire future depended on. On the shelf by the door sat a small white envelope her brother had mailed her 3 weeks before, still sealed. She grabbed her coat and walked past it without a glance. Welcome to today's story. If you enjoy emotional drama and shocking twists, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more unforgettable stories. And before we begin, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. But Darius had not always slept while good people died. 6 years earlier, he had loved her. Or he had loved what she gave him. Nala was a hospice nurse then. She sat with the dying for a living. She held hands that no one else would hold. She learned young that a person's true self shows up in the last room when there is nothing left to perform. Her brother taught her that. His name was Isaiah. They grew up in a narrow house with a leaking roof and a mother who worked 2 jobs and still sang in the kitchen. Nala remembered one winter when the heat got shut off. She was 9, Isaiah was 15. He gave her his navy blue coat, too big for him even then, and told her he wasn't cold. He sat up all night by the window so she could sleep. In the morning his lips were blue and he was still smiling. "A big brother's job," he said, "is to make sure his sister never goes without." She never forgot the weight of that coat on her shoulders. When their mother got sick years later, Nala nursed her to the end. Isaiah paid what he could, which never seemed like much. He drove a rusted brown car. He always seemed to be starting over. The family had a name for him: Failure. Darius said it first, at a cookout, laughing. "Your brother's a nice man, just never made anything of himself." The others laughed too. Isaiah only smiled and passed the plate. Nala noticed he never argued. She noticed he watched people when they thought no one was watching. She should have wondered why. By the time her son was born, the marriage was already cold. Darius had found a new religion, and its name was the Deal, a waterfront development, towers, shops, a marina. He said it 100 times a day. "This is the one. This changes everything." He took calls he stepped outside for. The calls were for Teshi. Teshi was his partner on paper. She called Nala the wife, the way you'd say the help. "Darius needs someone who understands the world he's entering," Teshi said once, sweetly, in Nala's own kitchen. Nala poured her tea and said nothing. Mama Abina approved. "She has ambition," his mother said. "Nursing is sweet, but it isn't a future." Nala thought about a lot of things she never said. She thought about the baby sleeping in the next room. She thought about her brother who called every Sunday and never once asked her for anything. "You still visiting that brother of yours?" Darius sneered one night. "Waste of gas." She went to his small apartment the next day with a pot of stew because he had sounded thin on the phone. He was thinner than his voice. He held her son and hummed the song their mother used to sing. You're the only one who comes, Isaiah said quietly. Where else would I be? She said. He looked at her a long moment. One day you'll understand why I stayed quiet. She thought he meant the years of being laughed at. She kissed his forehead and went home. 3 weeks later, at 3 in the morning, the phone rang, and her husband rolled over and went back to sleep. The hospital was cold and too bright. She ran the halls in her house shoes. She reached his room as the machines went quiet. She held his hand while it was still warm. She did not scream. She sat with him the way she had sat with 100 strangers, and she sang the kitchen song until her voice gave out. A man was waiting in the hall when she finally stepped out, older, gray at the temples, a dark suit that had seen real occasions. Mrs. Nala, he said gently, my name is Solomon. I was your brother's attorney and his friend. Attorney, she repeated. Isaiah could barely afford a phone. He asked me to find you tonight if it came to this. Your brother left you more than you think. Come to my office when you can, but do not sign anything anyone puts in front of you this week. Anything at all. He pressed a heavy card into her hand. What is this about? She asked. In time, he said. Bury your brother first. He left her holding a question in an empty hallway. That night, home in the dark, Nala sat on the bathroom floor so no one would hear her. She was not thinking about the strange lawyer. She was thinking that if she had left at the first ring, she might have made it in time. She might have held him longer. She kept hearing her husband's voice. He can wait until morning. And a smaller, crueler voice underneath it, her own. Why didn't you just go? Why did you beg a man who was never going to move? She stayed on that floor until sunrise. Then she got up, washed her face, and made her son's breakfast like nothing had broken. The funeral was small, 11 people. Darius came late and checked his watch. Mama Abina wore black like it was a fashion. Teshi did not come at all, which Nala found strange, because Teshi had never met Isaiah. Or so Nala believed. Sad little turnout, Mama Abina whispered. He lived small, he goes small. Nala weighed a single flower on the coffin. She saved her tears for the car. A week later, she sat across from Solomon on a long table. He slid a folder toward her but kept his hand on it. Your brother did not want anyone to know what he built. He wanted to be loved as a poor man so he would know it was real. You are the only person who passed that test. He lifted his hand. Inside the folder was not a check. It was a name, the Cornerstone Foundation. He did not leave you cash. Cash gets taken. He left you a foundation, a trust, and he named you its sole successor, its chair. How big is it? She asked. Bigger than this room can hold, but not today. He closed the folder. Carry the name home and say nothing to your husband. Cornerstone. The word rang a bell she couldn't place. She placed it that night. It was printed on the spine of the binder Darius guarded like scripture, the one word that made his eyes light up. Cornerstone Fund. Her hands went cold. She opened the binder while he slept. Towers, a marina, and stamped across the financing page the line that made the whole thing stand up. Anchor Investor, Cornerstone. Without it, the numbers collapsed. Without it, there was no deal. Her husband's entire future rested on her brother's foundation, and he had no idea it was hers. The next morning, Solomon laid out the rest, fast and plain. A letter funding request submitted to Cornerstone 8 months ago. Denied. Darius's signature at the bottom. Across the top, in her brother's careful hand, 2 words. Not yet. He was watching your husband, Solomon said. He wanted to see how the man treated you before he decided what to do with him. He was still deciding the night he died. He paused. There is one more thing. Money has moved from an account in your name, one you never opened. Someone used your information to guarantee part of his construction loan. That's fraud, she said. Yes, and it is evidence. Do not touch it. We are not planning revenge. We gather, we wait. She nodded, but that night she did not feel like a woman gathering evidence. She felt like a woman standing at a fork in a dark road. She sat at the kitchen table with the letter of intent Darius had left out, the one that would tie her name and her son's future to his deal, and she thought about how easy it would be to simply sign it, to keep the peace, to stay the wife who poured tea and said nothing. Part of her still loved the man she married, or the ghost of him. Part of her was tired all the way to the bone. Her son cried out in the next room. She went to him. She held him in the dark, and she understood that keeping the peace was just another word for teaching her boy that this was normal. She put the pen down. She did not sign. A few days later, she found Teshy's car outside Solomon's building, not her own attorney's, Solomon's. That night, she checked Darius's phone while he showered. One message from Teshy glowed at the top. She has no idea what she's sitting on. Keep her calm. Once it's ours, we handle the child and the paperwork together. The child. Not the deal. The child. Nala set the phone down exactly where it had been. She looked in on her son, one fist by his cheek. She did not cry. She started writing things down. The next morning, the game changed. A man in a cheap tie handed her an envelope at the door. Custody papers. Darius was petitioning for primary custody of their son. The filing called Nala emotionally unstable, financially dependent, unfit. Mama Abina had signed a statement. So had Teshy. Then she understood the shape of the whole thing. They didn't just want her gone. They wanted the boy. Control the child, and one day you control everything her brother built. They had found out. Not all of it, but enough to be dangerous. She called Solomon with a steady voice. They filed for custody of my son. For the first time, Solomon sounded shaken. Then they know more than they should. There is a leak, and I will find it. His voice hardened. A custody claim built on lies needs you to look unstable, so you will be the calmest woman in the state. Understand? I understand. There is a gala, the Cornerstone Memorial, 3 weeks out, in honor of your brother. Every investor your husband has ever wanted will be there. He has begged for a month for an invitation because he thinks it is his last chance at the anchor money. A pause. He does not know the woman who signs that money will be standing at the podium. You want me to walk in there? As what you are, but only when the paperwork is clean, not before. Then make it clean, she said. Something shifted in the house that week because Darius could feel the ground moving. He saw the lawyer's card. He noticed the locked drawer. He did not know what she knew, and it frightened him. So he changed his face. He came home with flowers for the first time in 3 years. He kissed her forehead. He held the baby and called himself a fool. I've been lost, he said, sitting close, taking her hand. This deal made me someone I'm not, but it's about to close, and then it's just us again. You, me, our son. His thumb moved over her knuckles. Whatever some lawyer's been whispering, don't let a stranger break up our family. Sign with me. Stand with me. We're so close. Nala looked at the man who would not drive her to a dying brother, now begging with soft eyes. She almost admired the performance. You're right, she said quietly. We are close. Relief flooded his face. He never heard the second meaning. He had no idea how close. She spent those 3 weeks becoming stone. She smiled, she cooked, she let Teshi call her the wife, and every night she documented the fraudulent account, the forged signature, the denied request in her brother's hand, the messages pulled clean and dated, the custody filing built on statements she could prove were false. She learned the foundation the way she once learned a patient's chart, slowly, completely. "You keep saying it's large," she told Solomon. "How large?" He looked at her a long moment. "Large enough that when you say a name in that room, men who have never noticed you will hold their breath. You are not the anchor investor's guest, Nala. You are the anchor. Every dollar your husband is chasing answers to you." She read the figure at the bottom of the page. She set it down carefully. She did not cry. "Then I'll wear my brother's coat, the navy blue one. He wore it for 10 years while they laughed. I'll carry it in." On her way out that night, she finally stopped at the shelf by the door. The sealed envelope, still waiting. She did not open it yet. She slipped it into the pocket of the coat, over her heart, and carried it out into the dark. The gala was gold and glass, chandeliers, a string quartet, 200 of the city's important people in their best. Darius arrived like a man walking into his own coronation. Teshi was on his arm in silver. Mama Abina glided behind them, chin high. They saw Nala across the room and stopped. "What is she doing here, in that rag?" Darius crossed the floor fast. "You embarrass me. Go home. This is the most important night of my life." "I know," Nala said. "You don't know anything," he snapped. "Do not ruin this." "I won't ruin it," she said. "I'll finish it." Before he could answer, a man at the podium tapped the microphone. Solomon. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for honoring the man who built the Cornerstone Foundation. A quiet man, a man the world underestimated." His eyes found Nala. It was his wish that his successor be revealed only once, in person, tonight, the sole heir to his estate, the new chair of Cornerstone, the person who now directs every dollar this foundation gives. The room leaned in. Darius straightened his jacket. His whole face opened with a wild, greedy hope. This was it, the anchor, about to be handed to him in front of everyone. Beside him, Teshi had gone still, too still. Her eyes were already moving to the exits because she alone had started to do the math. Mama Abina lifted her chin, certain a fortune was about to bless her son, and through him, her. "Please welcome," Solomon said, "Nala." The room turned. For one long second, nobody moved. Then 200 faces found the woman, and a ripple of confused murmurs rolled through the gold room. Darius's smile froze on his face like something painted there. The color drained from him slowly, from the top down. Teshi closed her eyes. Mama Abina reached for the back of a chair, and Nala walked to the podium, slowly. She did not hurry for anyone. She turned to face 200 faces and the 3 that had thrown her out into the dark. "My brother was Isaiah. You called him a failure. He drove a rusted car so he could give quietly. He wore this coat for 10 years while my family laughed at him. He built all of this, and he left it to me." Darius had gone the color of ash. "Some of you are here for the anchor investment on a waterfront development," Nala said. "My brother reviewed it before me. He wrote 2 words on it while he was alive." She let the silence stretch. "Not yet." She looked directly at her husband. "The answer is now no. Cornerstone will not fund this project or any project led by Darius. That decision is final, and it is mine." A murmur rolled through the room like a wave. Teshi stepped forward, still smooth. Nala, grief is a hard place to make decisions. A clean break is kinder for everyone. You would know about clean breaks. You've been to my attorney's office. You told my husband to keep me calm until it was, and I'm quoting you, hours. Teshy's smile finally cracked. Nala did not raise her voice. Her calm was the loudest thing in the room. That was peak 1. But her brother had taught her that the last room always tells the truth, and the truth was not finished. As the crowd buzzed, Teshy turned on Darius. "I'm not going down for your fraud," she said low and fast. "You told me she'd never find out." "Find out what?" Nala said quietly. Teshy's eyes flicked to her, cornered, choosing herself. "He knew," Teshy said, "about your brother. 2 months before he died. I found out Isaiah owned Cornerstone, and I told Darius. That's why he stopped fighting the marriage. He was going to wait for the old man to pass, let it all come to you, and take it through the boy. The custody filing was written before your brother died. I have the drafts, dated." The floor tilted under Nala. 2 months before he died. The night of the call, when Isaiah lay dying and Darius rolled over and went back to sleep, Darius had not been ignorant. He was calculating. He knew exactly who his brother was, and he decided a dying billionaire was worth to him gone. Nala turned to look at her husband. "You knew," she said, not a question. "You knew what he was, and when they called to say he was dying, you told me he could wait until morning." Darius said nothing. His silence said everything. The room had gone very quiet. Phones were up. Solomon stepped to Nala's side and, in a voice meant to carry, ended it. "An account was opened in this woman's name without her consent and used to guarantee a construction loan. That is forgery. A custody petition was drafted 2 months before the death it claims to grieve. That is not a father's love. That is a plan. We have all of it, dated, notarized, copied." Mama Abina reached for her son's arm. "Darius, we should go." "Sit down, Mama Abina," Nala said without heat. "You signed a statement calling me unfit, under oath. You may want your own lawyer before you touch that door." Mama Abina sat down. Nala did not gloat. She did not scream. She simply stopped giving them her time. She stepped away from the podium, walked to a quiet corner of that golden room, and finally took the sealed envelope from the coat over her heart. She opened it. Her brother's handwriting, the same careful hand that wrote, "Not yet." "Nala, if you're reading this, I'm gone, and Solomon kept his promise. I stayed quiet all my life for one reason. I wanted to know who loved me with empty hands. Everyone had a smile for money. You had stew and a song when I had nothing to give you back. You gave me your last, the way I once gave you my coat. So I'm giving you everything. Not so you can be rich, so you can do what we watched our mother do with no help and no rest. Take care of the ones nobody sees, the dying poor, the women who give up their whole lives to sit in the last room. Build them a place. Put my name on it if you want, but put their names in the books. That's the fortune. The rest is just paper. I love you. Stop crying. Get to work. Isaiah." She read it twice. Then, and only then, alone in the corner, she let herself cry. Not the ugly grief of that hospital hall. Quiet tears, the kind that come when someone finally sees you, even from the grave. She thought of a 15-year-old boy by a cold window giving his little sister his only coat, smiling with blue lips. A big brother's job is to make sure his sister never goes without. He had kept that job to the very end. The custody case died in a week. You cannot claim a mother is unstable when your own filing predates the death you blamed her for. Darius lost the deal, the loan, the name he'd sold his marriage to buy. Teshy's testimony saved her from the worst and buried him in the rest. Mama Abina stopped going to the church where everyone had now heard. Nala did not chase any of them. She let the paper her brother taught her to gather do the work. Then she got to work. She kept Cornerstone, but turned it toward the last room. She opened the first Isaiah's house within the year, a place where families caring for the dying could rest, where a hospice nurse could sit with someone poor, hold a hand no one else would hold, and earn a real wage for it. She started a fund for women who left careers to care for family, so love would no longer mean ruin. She hung it in the front hall of the first house, under a small brass plate. The plate did not carry a dollar figure. It carried a line: "Take care of the ones nobody sees." Her son grew up in a home full of that work. He learned to hold plates and pass them. He learned that the quietest person in the room is often carrying the most. And on Sunday mornings, in a kitchen that no longer leaked, Nala hummed her mother's song while she cooked and let the sun come all the way in. She had gone to that hospital alone. She did not stay alone. She built a house so that no one in the last room ever would. If this story moved it with someone who needs to hear it, tell me. See you in the next unforgettable story.
There, out loud, so everyone hears. He snatched McKenna's phone and threw it into the swimming pool as his sisters recorded every second, and his mistress smiled. You never deserved him, she sneered. McKenna said nothing. They mistook her silence for weakness. Moments later, a black car rolled through the gates, and every eye turned toward it. If you've ever been underestimated by the very people who should have loved you, stay with me. Watch what happens when the woman they broke turns out to be the one holding, as this story is going to hit somewhere real. The party had lights strung across the whole backyard. Gold ones, the kind you rent when you want strangers to think you're rich. Marcus loved lights like that. He loved anything that made people look at him. And that night, under all that borrowed gold, he looked like a king. But a king of what? That was the question nobody at that party thought to ask. McKenna moved through the crowd quietly, the way she always did. She refilled a glass here. She smiled at a cousin there. She wore a simple dress, no jewelry that shouted. People walked past her like she was staff. Some of them thought she was. Her husband stood by the pool with a drink in his hand, telling a story that made everybody laugh. It was a story about her, about how she didn't understand his world, about how he carried the whole household. The guests laughed because he was the host, and you laugh at the host's jokes. McKenna laughed too, soft, so nobody would feel awkward. Have you ever laughed at a joke that was slowly killing you? She had, for 9 years. Her sisters were the loudest, Adeaze and Nia, 2 women who had never worked a day the way McKenna worked, but who spoke about her like she was a charity case Marcus had picked up off the street. That night, they had their phones out early, filming everything, waiting. You film when you already know something is coming. Remember that. And then there was the other woman, Simone. She stood too close to Marcus, laughed a beat too fast at his jokes, touched his arm like she had a right to it. McKenna had noticed her weeks ago. A wife always notices. But McKenna said nothing, because McKenna had learned a long time ago that silence sees more than screaming ever will. Earlier that evening, before the cruelty, there was a small moment. You almost wouldn't notice it. A young waiter, nervous, spilled a tray of drinks near the pool. Glass everywhere. The boy froze, terrified he'd be fired on the spot. The sisters rolled their eyes. Marcus started to snap at him. But McKenna was already there, kneeling in her simple dress, picking up glass with her bare hands, telling the boy that it was fine, that everybody drops a tray sometime, that he should go get himself some water and come back when he was ready. Nobody clapped for that. Nobody filmed it. Kindness never trends. But I want you to hold on to that picture. The richest person at the party, on her knees, helping the one everyone else looked past. Because in about 10 minutes, the same crowd that ignored her mercy was going to cheer her humiliation. Watch how fast people turn. The trouble started small, the way real trouble always does. McKenna's phone buzzed once in her hand, just once. She glanced down at it and started to step away from the crowd, quiet, toward the house. That was all. But Marcus saw it, and something in him, something drunk and scared and mean, decided that her stepping away was a crime. "Where you going?" he called across the yard, loud. Everybody heard it. Everybody turned. "Just inside," McKenna said. "Who you texting? Huh? Who you always texting?" "Nobody, Marcus." "Nobody," he laughed, but there was no fun in it. "Nobody. You hear that? Nobody." He looked around at his guests, feeding on their attention, needing it. "My wife thinks I'm stupid." Now, here is a thing about men like Marcus. They are not cruel because they are strong. They are cruel because they are afraid. And Marcus had been afraid of his wife for a long time without ever understanding why. He just knew that when she looked at him, calm, quiet, unbothered, he felt small. And a small man in front of a crowd will do anything to feel big again. He snatched McKenna's phone out of her hand. "Marcus," her voice stayed level. "Give it back." "Beg." He smiled, now wide, ugly. "Beg. Out loud so everyone hears." The yard went quiet, the good kind of quiet for him, the kind where 100 eyes wait to see what a man will do.
Somebody should have stopped him. That's what you're thinking, isn't it? 100 grown people standing there, and not one of them stepped in. That's the part nobody likes to admit about humiliation. It needs a crowd, and the crowd almost always lets it happen. A cousin looked at his shoes. A neighbor sipped her drink. Adeaze zoomed her camera in, and Marcus, feeling all those eyes feed him, got bigger and meaner by the second. "You hear me?" he said. "Beg, or does the big silent queen think she's too good?" He didn't know how close he was to the truth. He was mocking her with the exact word that would end him. Isn't that always how it goes? The cruel ones say the true thing by accident and laugh, never knowing. McKenna did not beg. So he threw it. A long, lazy arc through the gold light, and the phone hit the water and sank, the screen glowing pale as it went down. His sisters caught all of it, laughing behind their cameras. Simone stepped up beside him and looked McKenna up and down like she was something spilled on the floor. "You never deserved him," Simone said. And McKenna, soaked at the edge, her whole marriage sinking in 8 feet of chlorine, said nothing. They thought that silence was surrender. They thought a woman with no phone had no power. They thought the game was over. But watch her hands. She's not shaking from fear. And under the water, That pale, glowing screen showed a small logo on the lock screen, a logo not one guest at that party recognized, though half the country did. They laughed at a woman worth more than everything they were standing on. The house, the lights, the pool, all of it. But that gate at the end of the driveway was already starting to open. But what happened next, no one at that party saw coming. Let me take you back first, because to understand a quiet woman, you have to know where the quiet came from. Long before the mansion, before Marcus, before the gold lights, there was a small house with a crooked porch and a woman named Isaba sitting on it. Isaba was McKenna's grandmother, and she raised the girl on almost nothing. They were poor, not the kind of poor people pretend to have survived, the real kind. The kind where you learn the price of everything and the value of a few things that can't be priced at all. Grandma Isaba worked with her hands her whole life and never once raised her voice. McKenna used to ask her why. Why don't you ever yell, Grandma? Even when people did her wrong, even when the world took from her. And Isaba would just rock in her chair and say, "Baby, a loud woman spends all her fire on noise. A quiet woman keeps hers. You keep yours." A quiet woman is not an empty one. Isaba never said those exact words, but she lived them every day on that crooked porch, and the girl watching her learned them by heart. There was one thing Isaba owned that mattered more than anything else in that house: a brass key on a leather cord, old, worn, smooth from years of a thumb rubbing over it. McKenna asked once what it opened, and her grandmother smiled the way old people smile when they're about to tell you something you're too young to understand. "This opens more than doors," Isaba said. "It opens the day people finally see you. Everybody gets one of those days, baby. You just gotta live long enough and quiet enough to reach it. And when it comes, you won't have to say a word. The day will speak for you." McKenna was maybe 12. She didn't understand, but she took the key and she wore it, and she never took it off again. She grew up steady, she grew up smart, and she grew up with a hunger that had nothing to do with showing off. While other kids dreamed of being seen, McKenna dreamed of building something so solid it wouldn't matter whether anyone saw it or not. She started small, a little service, a few clients, work done so well and so quietly that it spread by whisper. She reinvested every dollar. She told nobody, not because she was ashamed, but because she wanted to know someday whether a man could love the plain version of her before he ever met the powerful one. Let me tell you how hard those first years were, because the ending doesn't mean anything if you don't know the beginning. There were nights the young woman worked until the sky turned gray in a one-room place with a bad heater and a second-hand desk that wobbled.
She taught herself everything nobody had ever offered to teach a poor black girl from a crooked porch. She got doors shut in her face. She got laughed out of rooms by men in good suits who assumed she was there to bring the coffee. And every single time she thought of Grandma Isaba rocking on that porch, saying, "Keep your fire, baby. Don't spend it on their doubt." She'd walk out of those rooms, sit in her old car, and let herself cry for exactly 5 minutes. Then she'd wipe her face and get back to work. Have you ever built something with nobody watching, nobody cheering, nobody even believing? That's the loneliest work there is, and it's also the strongest because it belongs to you completely. Nobody handed McKenna a thing. She turned that little service into a bigger one, and the bigger one into a company, and the company into something that started swallowing its rivals whole, all while wearing a plain dress and letting the world call her nothing. She learned that the quiet has a strange power. People say too much in front of a woman they think is small. She heard everything.
She forgot nothing. And piece by piece, deal by patient deal, the porch girl built something the men in the good suits would one day be terrified of. By the time she met Marcus, she already had more than he would ever guess. But she came to him plain. Simple dress, simple job, she called it. Consulting, she said, and shrugged, and let him think it was small. And here's the part that hurts. She built it in silence for 9 years while he mocked her at parties. That quiet little consulting job she always waved off, it had become something enormous. Something that employed more people than lived in the whole town Marcus grew up in. Something whose name moved markets. The porch girl with the brass key had become one of the most powerful people in the country, and her own husband thought she was a housewife who got lucky marrying him. She let him think it. That was the test. She kept waiting for him to love her small self so she could someday surprise him with the big one and watch him be proud. There were signs if he'd wanted to see them. A phone that rang at odd hours with people who called her by a title he never heard because she always stepped outside to answer. Trips she took alone to see family that put her in cities where enormous deals were quietly closing. A calm about money that a struggling housewife could never have. The calm of someone who has never once, not in 9 years, actually worried about the bills he thought he was covering. But Marcus didn't want to see. Do you know why? Because seeing it would have meant admitting she was the strong one, and his whole picture of himself was built on being the one who carried her. Take that away, and what was he? A man living in a house he couldn't afford, holding a marriage together with lies. So he chose blindness. Men do that. They'd rather be fooled than feel small. He never passed the test, and the day was coming when he'd fail it in front of everyone. She kept her secret for love. Soon, love would force her hand. We're getting to the part where it matters most. Stay with me. The party ended the way those things end. Guests slipped away, whispering. The sisters posted their videos and watched the little hearts pile up. Marcus got drunker and meaner, and McKenna went to bed in a house that had stopped feeling like hers a long time ago. But the days after, that's where the real betrayal grew teeth. Because Simone had a plan, and the phone in the pool was only the beginning. Let me tell you something true about the outsider. Simone was not there for love. She never had been. She was there because a man Marcus had crossed in business, a rival with a long memory and deeper pockets, had pointed her at Marcus like a weapon. Get close, the rival had told her. Find out what the wife is hiding, because everyone in that world had started to sense that something didn't add up. Marcus spent like a rich man, but earned like a struggling one. His company was bleeding money. So where was the lifestyle coming from? Who was really paying for the gold lights? Simone was supposed to find out. And Simone had her own reasons to do it well. She had grown up poor too, poorer than she ever let on. And she made herself a promise that she would never, ever be poor again. She looked at McKenna's quiet and she didn't see a person. She saw an obstacle between herself and safety. That's how she slept at night. She told herself it was survival. You see how betrayal works when it's real? Nobody thinks they're the villain. Everybody's just scared.
Marcus was scared too. Simone fed that fear like a fire. She leaned close to him one night and whispered the poison she'd been building for weeks. "She's hiding money from you," Simone said. "Why do you think she's always on that phone? She's got accounts you've never seen. She's planning to leave you and take everything." "A woman that quiet? She's not simple, Marcus. She's calculating." And the terrible thing is, Simone was almost right. McKenna did have accounts he'd never seen. She was calculating, but not to rob him, to protect what she'd built from the very people now circling her. Marcus believed the lie because he needed to,
because believing it made him the victim instead of the fool, because it's easier to hate a woman than to admit she was always more than you. The sisters joined the hunt. Adaeze cornered Marcus in the kitchen one afternoon. "You need to move fast," she told him. "Get the house in your name. Get her to sign over that little business of hers before she wakes up and lawyers up. Do it while she's still quiet." Nia nodded along, and their mother, Mama Dolores, a woman with a face like a closed door, said only one thing from her chair: "Do it clean." That was the family. That was the blood Marcus trusted over his own wife. And here's a moment that should have warned them, if any of them had a conscience left to warn them. One night, McKenna came downstairs for water and heard them in the sitting room, all of them, laughing about her. She stood in the dark hallway and listened to her husband describe her as a slow woman I felt sorry for. She heard Adaeze say she was never one of us. She heard Simone laugh that quick, hungry laugh, and she heard her mother-in-law, the woman who'd sat at McKenna's own table for 9 holidays, say, "Once the papers are signed, put her out." Put her out. Like a dog. After 9 years. McKenna didn't cry in that hallway. She just stood very still, memorizing every voice. Because a woman who has been quiet her whole life has one gift the loud will never understand. She remembers exactly who showed her their teeth. Every single one of them. They were writing their own ending in that room, and not one of them knew it. They planned to strip her bare. They planned to make her sign her own life away and thank them for the pen. And McKenna? For a while, she broke. Don't let anyone tell you the strong don't crack. She sat alone in the dark of that big, empty house, the brass key pressed into her palm so hard it left a mark, and she asked herself the question that had been chasing her 9 years. Had she stayed quiet too long? Had all her patience, all her silence, all her waiting to be loved for the small version of herself, had it just taught these people that she was theirs to erase? She disappeared on purpose, and now she wasn't sure how to be seen. She went numb. She stopped eating much. She moved through the days like a ghost in her own home while they plodded around her, smiling. There was one night that was the lowest of all. She stood in the bathroom at 3 in the morning, looking at a stranger in the mirror. A woman who ran boardrooms full of powerful men couldn't remember the last time her own husband had said something kind to her. And for a long, terrible moment, she thought about it, about giving up, about signing the papers, about letting them have it all just to make the hurting stop. That's how heavy it got. You've had a night like that, haven't you? Where the easiest thing in the world would be to just disappear for good. And then her hand closed around the brass key at her throat, and she heard her grandmother's voice as clear as if Esaba was standing in the room. It opens the day people finally see you. You just have to live long enough and quiet enough to reach it. McKenna looked at the woman in the mirror one last time, and slowly something came back into her eyes. Not rage, something steadier than rage. She dried her face. She stood up straight. The morning was over. The reckoning was about to begin. But numb is not the same as finished. And here's the thing they forgot. You can take a woman's phone. You can't take her mind, and you can't take the people out in the world who answer only to her. There was a line they didn't know about. An old burner kept for exactly the kind of day her grandmother had promised would someday come. Late one night, McKenna picked it up. She dialed one number, and when the man on the other end answered, she said only 4 words, in a voice so calm it should have frightened everyone in that house. "It's time. Come home." She'd spent 9 years disappearing. She had one night left to be seen. Marcus, being Marcus, couldn't just take everything in private. He needed an audience. He always needed an audience. So he staged it. He called it a reconciliation dinner, a chance to start fresh, he told her, with that smile that used to fool her. Really, it was a trap dressed as a peace offering. He invited the family. He invited a lawyer. He even invited Simone, who came in a red dress like the mistress had ever been the wife. There were a few guests, too, and a couple of cameras, because if a man is going to break a woman, men like Marcus want it documented. They sat around a long table, candles, the good plates, and in front of McKenna's seat, a folder of papers. The house, the accounts, and a line buried in the legal language that would sign away every piece of the company she'd built. All of it sliding across the table into his hands. Marcus pushed the folder toward her and leaned back, king of his gold-lit castle. "Sign," he said, "and I'll let you keep your dignity." The sisters had their phones up. Simone smiled her small smile. Mama Dolores watched with those closed-door eyes. McKenna looked at the papers. She looked at the pen, and she did not pick it up. "Marcus," she said quietly, "do you know what I do for a living?" He laughed. "Consulting, little consulting. Sign the paper." "I'm going to ask you one more time to think about that question, because after tonight, you're never going to get to ask it again." That was when the headlights hit the windows. A black car rolled up the long driveway and stopped. Every head at that table turned. Marcus's smile flickered, just for a second, because he didn't recognize the car, and a man like him hates a thing he can't place. The door opened. A man stepped out, tall, calm, in a dark suit, carrying a slim case. He walked up to the house and inside like he'd been there 1,000 times, and he did not so much as glance at Marcus. He walked the length of that long table, past the sisters, past Simone, past the lawyer, and he stopped behind McKenna's chair. Marcus found his voice. "Who are you?" "That's my driver. I don't—" "No, sir," he said, without heat. "My name is Obi, and I don't work for you." He set the slim case down beside McKenna and inclined his head to her, the way you bow to someone you have served for years. "Chairman," he said, "everything's ready." Chairman. The word landed in that room like a stone in still water. The sisters' phones lowered an inch. The lawyer's face went pale, because the lawyer, unlike the family, actually read the business pages, and the lawyer had just realized whose table he was really sitting at. McKenna rose from her chair, slowly, and something in her had changed, or rather, something she'd been hiding for 9 years finally stood up straight. The quiet was still there, but now you could feel the weight underneath it. She reached up and drew the leather cord from under her collar, the brass key, her grandmother's key. She fit it into the lock of the slim case Obi had set down, and she turned it, and it opened. This opens the day people finally see you. And inside were the papers that told the truth. Let me explain something to everyone at this table, since my husband was kind enough to gather you all in one place. She slid the first document out. This company my husband calls my little consulting job. I built it. Alone, over 9 years while he told rooms full of people that I didn't understand his world. She set it down. I understand his world better than he does, because I own a piece of it he never knew existed. She slid out the second. 2 years ago, Marcus's company was drowning. Quietly, a holding group bought the debt and kept it breathing. Marcus thought it was a miracle. Investors, he said. Angels. She looked at him. I was the angel, Marcus. The roof over your head, this table, these plates, the gold lights you love so much. You've been living inside something I built, and mocking the woman who built it. Silence. Real silence now. Not his, hers. Adeza found her voice first, and it came out shaking. "You're lying. This is some kind of trick. Marcus, she's bluffing." McKenna didn't even look at her. She slid a third document down the table until it stopped in front of the sisters. "That's the account your videos were monetized on, the one you've been so proud of. Read the parent company at the top of the page. Take your time." Adeza read it. Adeza went gray, because the name at the top of the page was the same name that had been glowing on a phone at the bottom of a swimming pool. Naya grabbed the paper from her sister's hands, and then she put it down like it had burned her, and neither of them lifted a camera again for the rest of that night. Simone was the next to break. She stood up, half out of her chair, understanding at last that the wife she'd been sent to expose had outthought every one of them months ago, including the rival who'd sent her. "That's not possible," Simone whispered. "You were sent here to find what I was hiding," McKenna said to her, without anger, which was somehow worse than anger. "I let you keep looking. It kept your employer comfortable and blind while I bought the ground out from under him. You did your job beautifully, Simone. You just did it for me." Simone's mouth opened, and nothing came out. "That's not possible," she said again, smaller this time. "It's not only possible," McKenna said, gently, almost kindly. "It's already done." She turned back to Marcus, and this is the part I want you to hear, because she'd waited 9 years to say it, and she said it soft. "You told me to beg, out loud, so everyone could hear." She let the words sit. "I never needed to beg, Marcus. I owned the room before I walked into it." Marcus tried, the way drowning men try. "McKenna, baby, listen. Whatever they told you, whatever you think you heard, we can fix this. You and me. We built this together." "We?" It was the only time her voice rose, and it rose only an inch. "You threw my phone in the pool 3 weeks ago and told me to beg. Tonight, you gathered your family to make me sign my life into your hands. And now that you know whose hands were really holding whose, now it's we?" She shook her head slowly. "You had 9 years to say we and mean it. You said it for the first time the second you found out I was worth keeping. That's not love, Marcus. That's a man reading a price tag." He had no answer. What answer is there? And the cruelest kindness of the whole night was the simplest one. Marcus finally understood, sitting there in his rented castle, that the fortune he'd mocked, the one he'd called her little pretend money, the one worth more than his whole bloodline would earn in 10 lifetimes, was the only thing that had been keeping him alive. Every dollar he'd sneered at was a dollar holding up the floor beneath his feet. The betrayers fell silent, and the woman they'd tried to erase stood there, dry-eyed, calm, whole. A quiet woman is not an empty one, and this one, it turned out, was full to the very brim. Now, you might expect the part where she screams, where she throws them all out and burns it down and laughs while it burns. That's not who she was, and that's what made it worse for them. The fall came the way she'd built everything, quietly and completely. The holding group called in what Marcus owed, not out of spite, but because it was simply time, and the scaffolding had always been hers to move. The accounts froze. The mansion, which he'd never truly owned, went back to the group that did. The gold lights came down. The cars went away. Piece by piece, the life Marcus had humiliated his wife inside of was revealed to be a thing she had been holding up with one hand the entire time, and she simply, quietly, let go. Simone didn't wait for the end. The moment the money's true owner was known, the moment she understood there was nothing here to steal and nothing to save, she was gone. Her rival backer dropped her the same week. She'd been sent to find the wife's secret, and instead, the wife had found her months ago and let her keep chasing a prize that was never on the table. Simone left with less than she had arrived with, further from the safety she'd betrayed her own soul to reach. That's the thing about selling yourself for security. You always find out too late that the buyer was broke. The sisters got the worst mirror of all. Those videos they'd filmed by the pool, so proud, so sure, they spread. But the story spread with them now, the whole story. And the internet that had laughed with Ariaze and Nia turned and laughed at them instead. They'd tried to make McKenna the joke. They became it. Now written about them by the thousands. The friends who'd hearted their cruelty stopped answering their calls. That's the thing about people who only love your status. They leave the moment the status does. Ariaze actually came to McKenna once, months later, all sweetness, asking for just a little help for family. And McKenna looked at the sister-in-law who had said she was never one of us, and she did not yell, and she did not gloat. She just said, "You told me I was never family. I'm only honoring your words." And she closed the door gently, the way you close a door on a chapter you're finally done reading. And Mama Dolores, the woman with the closed-door face, sat in a much smaller house afterward, in a silence she couldn't rearrange into anything that made her the wronged one. She'd wanted her son to put McKenna out. In the end, it was the family that got put out by nothing more than the truth. For people who lived and breathed status, being ordinary again was its own quiet punishment. No one had to lift a hand. They'd built their whole lives on a lie, and lies don't need pushing. They fall on their own. And McKenna, she did one thing that surprised everyone who knew the whole story. She left Marcus one small thing. Not the mansion, not the fortune, just enough. A modest place, a modest living, the kind of plain life he'd always secretly feared. She signed that mercy herself, and I promise you it stung him worse than ruin would have, because every ordinary morning for the rest of his life, he would have to wake up and know exactly what he'd thrown into that pool. Not a phone, a queen. And she'd let him live just well enough to remember it. She never raised her voice through any of it. Notice that. Not once. Power that has to shout was never really power. Real power can afford to whisper. Obi held the door for her, and McKenna walked out of that house the same way she'd walked through the party. Quietly, plainly, with a brass key resting where it belonged. Only this time, everyone was watching. This time, they saw her.
If McKenna's silence taught you anything tonight, let it be this. Never let anyone measure your worth by how loud you are. If this story moved you, his next time, the one they underestimate might just